My name is Brielle Carter. I'm 35 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my brother raised a shrimp fork over the dinner table and said, "Watch this. If her throat closes, I'll apologize." Everyone laughed, except me, and what happened 8 minutes later turned our perfectly staged family dinner into something no one could pretend was funny. But before I tell you how the paramedics ended up in my mother's driveway while the turkey was still warm on the table, take a second to like and subscribe only if stories about family dynamics, quiet humiliation, and emotional justice resonate with you. And tell me where you're watching from. I always read those. Now let me take you back to why that joke wasn't random. Because my seafood allergy wasn't new. It was inconvenient, and in my family, inconvenience becomes comedy. I developed the allergy at 27, sudden onset, unexpected, violent. The first time it happened, I thought I was having a panic attack. We were at a beach restaurant. I'd ordered linguine with clams. By the time the bill arrived, my lips were tingling. By the time we reached the car, my throat felt tight. By the time we hit the I couldn't speak. Anaphylaxis. That word changes you. They prescribed an EpiPen, told me it could escalate unpredictably, carry it everywhere. The doctor said, I did. My mother cried that night. My father Googled allergen cross-contamination for hours. My younger brother, Mason? He said, "So you're allergic to seafood now?" Convenient. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Mason has always treated my boundaries like personality quirks. When I stopped drinking at 30, he said I was in my wellness era. When I left my corporate job for consulting, he said I couldn't handle structure. When I ended an engagement because I found out my fiancé was lying about debt, Mason said I was allergic to commitment. So when I became allergic to seafood, it became material. You just don't like oysters. He'd say, you always hated shrimp. He'd add, as if preference and anaphylaxis were interchangeable. My parents would correct him lightly. Don't joke, my mom would say. But she'd smile when she said it, because in our family, Mason's sarcasm is currency, and I'm often the cost. This year's Thanksgiving was at my parents' house. My mother had been planning it for weeks. Handwritten place cards, candles, matching linen napkins, and seafood stuffing. That's tradition, she said when I reminded her gently, I'll make a separate batch for you. She didn't. Not intentionally. Just forgot. When I arrived at 3:17 p.m., the house smelled like butter and shellfish. My stomach tightened immediately. Did you separate the stuffing? I asked quietly in the kitchen. Oh, my mom said, pausing mid-baste. I used the same pan, but it's mostly bread. Mostly? That word doesn't comfort someone with anaphylaxis. It's okay, I said calmly. I'll just skip it. Mason walked in behind me. Still playing the allergy card? He smirked. It's not a card, I replied. It's dramatic. He said, there it was. Dramatic. The word he uses when I insist on something inconvenient. I didn't respond, because arguing about allergies before dinner is exhausting. We sat at the table at 4:02 p.m. turkey carved, wine poured, stuffing passed clockwise. When it reached me, I passed it along and touched. Mason leaned back in his chair. Just try a bite, he said casually. No, you don't even know. Yes, I do. You've convinced yourself. I looked at him steadily, and our doctor diagnosed me. Doctors overdiagnose everything now. My father cleared his throat. Mason? What? He shrugged. She never liked seafood. That's not the point, my mom murmured, but she didn't remove the bowl. She didn't reposition it. She let it sit in the center of the table like evidence. Just one shrimp, Mason said, picking one up with his fork. No, see? You're reacting already. I'm setting a boundary. You're proving my point. My heart rate ticked up. Not from allergy, from familiarity. This is how it always goes. He pushes, I refuse. He reframes it as emotional, everyone wants peace. So I'm expected to soften. Not tonight. I'm not eating it, I said calmly, because you're scared? He teased, because I value breathing. A few nervous laughs trickled around the table. Mason leaned forward slightly. What if it's fake? He said. Silence. What if you just convinced yourself you're allergic? I didn't. Prove it, And then he did something reckless. He lifted his fork, shrimp skewered at the tip, and waved it slightly in front of me. "Watch this," he said loudly. "If her throat closes, I'll apologize." My mother gasped lightly. "Mason, don't." But she was smiling, because part of her still thought it was sibling theatrics. He leaned across the table. "Closer, closer." "Stop," I said quietly. "Relax." He laughed. The shrimp was inches from my face, and in that moment, I had two options: swat it away, or stay still. I stayed still, because reacting would prove his narrative, and that's when everything shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. My throat tightened, not from panic, from proximity, because shellfish aerosolizes, and he didn't know that. But I did. And within 8 minutes, the laughter would stop, the table would empty, and the shrimp fork would be lying on the floor, because this wasn't preference, it was medical, and Mason had just turned it into a spectacle. At first, it was subtle, a tickle in the back of my throat, then a tightening, the kind that feels like someone gently pressing 2 fingers against your windpipe. Mason didn't notice. He leaned back in his chair, triumphant. "See," he said, grinning. "Nothing." I didn't answer, because I was busy measuring. Breath in, breath out. Controlled, don't escalate it. My mom resumed carving turkey like the moment had passed. My father poured more wine. The stuffing was still in the center of the table, the shrimp fork still in Mason's hand. Then my lips started tingling. That familiar electric buzz, tiny sparks along the edges. And I knew. Not panic. Recognition. I reached slowly into my purse under the table. EpiPen, my fingers wrapped around it. "Are you okay?" My sister, Chloe, whispered from across from me. Her voice was low, concerned. "Yes," I said, though it came out thinner than I expected. Mason rolled his eyes. "Don't start." My chest tightened another degree, like a belt being pulled 1 notch smaller. My father finally looked up. "Brielle," I swallowed. Wrong move. The swallow cut halfway down, air felt heavier now. "Thicker. I need." I tried to say, it came out strained, and that's when my mother noticed. Her knife froze mid-air. Oh, just that. Oh, not because she didn't believe me, because she recognized the sound. She'd heard it once before, 8 years ago in their waiting room. "Mason, put that down," she said sharply. But Mason didn't look scared yet. He looked confused. "Is she serious?" Yes. I was serious. My vision sharpened in that strange way it does when your body switches into survival mode. Edges to clear. Sounds too distant. I pulled the EpiPen from my bag. My hands weren't shaking. They were deliberate. "Call 911, Chloe said, already reaching for her phone. "It's fine," Mason said quickly. "She's panicking." That word again, panicking. As if my body was performing for drama. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the hardwood. My throat tightened further. Breathing became work. Not impossible, but labor. My father was on his feet now. "Brielle." I nodded once. Confirmation. "It's happening." My mother rushed around the table. "I didn't think she started." "I know." I managed to say. I pressed the EpiPen against my thigh. Counted. 1, 2, 3. The click was louder than I expected. The adrenaline burned immediately. Hot. Sharp. My heart kicked into overdrive. The room felt both faster and slower at the same time. Mason stood there, still holding the shrimp fork, color draining from his face. "This isn't real," he whispered. Chloe was already on the phone. "Yes. Anaphylaxis," she said clearly. "Seafood exposure." My mother's hands hovered uselessly near my shoulders. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying, over and over. I leaned against the counter, breathing shallow but present. The EpiPen buys time, it doesn't fix it, and everyone at that table suddenly understood something they hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't dramatic. This wasn't preference. This wasn't picky. This was medical. Sirens arrived 6 minutes later. The sound cut through the neighborhood like accusation. Red and blue lights flashing across the dining room walls. The turkey still steaming, stuffing untouched. The paramedics moved quickly, professional, efficient. How long since exposure? One asked. 10 minutes, Chloe replied. What was the allergen? Shrimp, my mother said faintly. The paramedic glanced at Mason. Was this accidental? The room went silent. I looked at my brother. He looked like a child who'd knocked over something expensive. Yeah, he said quickly. Accidental. I didn't correct him. Not yet. They placed me on the stretcher. Not because I couldn't walk, because protocol demands monitoring. As they wheeled me past the dining table, I caught a glimpse of the shrimp fork on the floor, the shrimp still skewered, and something about that image felt symbolic, casual, dismissive, dangerous. Mason followed us outside. I didn't think it was real. He said under his breath. I met his eyes. It doesn't have to feel real to you, I replied quietly. It just has to be real to me. That was the last thing I said before the ambulance doors closed. In the air, they monitored me for 4 hours. Steroids, antihistamines, observation. My throat stabilized, breathing returned to baseline, but something else shifted too. My mother sat beside my bed the entire time, silent, hands folded. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize it. She just watched. Mason didn't come in. He waited in the hallway, which told me everything. Around midnight, when the adrenaline wore off and exhaustion set in, my mom leaned closer. I should have stopped him. She whispered. Yes, I said softly. I thought it was harmless. It wasn't. Silence. He's always joked. She added. Yes. And I let him. There it was. Not just Mason's recklessness, her tolerance. That's what changed tonight. Not just the allergy, the boundary, because the next day, when the hospital bill arrived, and the extended family started asking questions, it wouldn't be about shrimp, it would be about accountability, and for the first time in his life Mason would not be able to laugh his way out of it. The hospital bill arrived 5 days later, not dramatic, not aggressive, just a clean white envelope with a window cutout and a barcode in the corner. Total due after insurance. $3,842.17 ambulance transport, or stabilization, medication administration, observation monitoring, $3,842 for 8 minutes of arrogance. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the number, not angry, not yet, just aware, because here's what people don't realize about emergencies. They don't just shake you emotionally, they invoice you. By Sunday, the story had spread. My aunt called first. He was just joking, she said softly. I didn't respond immediately. He didn't mean for it to go that far. I know. You shouldn't make this bigger than it is. Bigger than it is. I looked at the bill on the table. It closed my airway. I said calmly. Silence. Well, everyone feels bad. Feeling bad doesn't process payments. By dinner time, 3 cousins had texted. Are you okay? Crazy Thanksgiving lol. Lol. I didn't answer, because the part no one wanted to acknowledge was this. It wasn't crazy. It was preventable. That evening, my phone rang. Mason, I let it ring once. Then answered. Yeah, I didn't know. He said immediately. His voice was lower than usual, less polished. I know. You've exaggerated stuff before. What? You're sensitive. There it was. The old script. Sensitive. Emotional. Reactive. This wasn't sensitivity, I said evenly. I know that now. Silence. You embarrassed me, he added. That caught me off guard. I embarrassed you? In front of everyone. The ambulance. The sirens. I almost laughed. You put shrimp in my face. I didn't think it was real. You didn't need to think it was real. Silence. You could have just said no harder, he muttered. That's when the anger arrived, not explosive, precise. I said no. I replied calmly. You always say no, yes, and you always treat it like a debate. Silence. You're making me the villain, he said. You put me in an ambulance. He didn't answer, because that sentence has no counter. After a few seconds, he changed tone. What do you want from me? There it was. Not apology. Negotiation. I glanced at the bill again. I want you to pay the hospital invoice. Silence. Then, what? It's 3-8 for 2, 17. That's insane. So was the shrimp. You're serious? Yes. I didn't mean for that to happen. You meant to test it. Silence. I was joking. You were testing my boundary. I thought you were dramatic. And now? Long pause. I was wrong. That word hovered there. Wrong. Not funny. Not dramatic. Wrong. But wrong doesn't cover ambulance fees. You should have just told me it was that serious, he said softly. I did. No, like, seriously. I carried an EpiPen for 8 years. Silence. I thought that was precaution. It was. Then how did it get that bad? Because you put it in my face. The simplicity of that truth unsettled him. I don't have that kind of money just sitting around, he muttered. You have savings. That's for other things. This was for breathing. Silence. Then a sharper tone. You're going to make this legal? I don't need to. What does that mean? It means if you don't pay it, I'll send it to you formally. You'd invoice your own brother? Yes. There was a long, heavy pause. You've changed, he said. No, you're colder. I'm clearer. Silence. I'll think about it, he said finally. Don't think too long, and I hung up. That night, I replayed Thanksgiving in my head. The fork, the laughter, my mother smiling lightly when he teased, the room wanting ease instead of correction, and I realized something uncomfortable. Mason wasn't the only one who treated my allergy like entertainment. He was just the loudest. My mom had let it slide for years. Chloe had nervously giggled. My father had sighed and changed the subject. And I had swallowed it. Not shrimp. Dismissal. For years. But this time, I didn't. And here's the part Mason didn't understand yet. It wasn't about the $3,842.17. It was about precedent, because if he didn't pay it, if he laughed it off, if he minimized it again, then I wasn't just setting a boundary. I was setting a distance. And the family dinner 2 weeks later, the one where he thought everything would go back to normal, was about to teach him that sirens echo longer than jokes. 2 weeks later, my mother insisted on hosting Sunday dinner, just immediate family. She said, no drama. Interesting choice of words. No drama, as if the ambulance had been theatrical instead of medical. I almost didn't go. But absence gives people room to rewrite events, and I wasn't going to let Thanksgiving turn into that time Brielle overreacted. So I showed up at 5:12 p.m. No shrimp on the counter. No seafood in sight. My mother had scrubbed the kitchen like a crime scene. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, safe, intentional. She hugged me tighter than usual. Are you feeling okay? She asked softly. Yes. Her eyes lingered on my purse, the EpiPen bulge visible. She noticed. Good. Mason arrived 10 minutes later. He walked in like nothing had shifted. Casual jeans, car keys spinning around his finger. Hey, he said. No apology. No eye contact at first. Just normal. That was the problem. He expected normal. We sat down at 5:41 p.m. Smaller table this time. 6 chairs, closer. No stuffing bowl in the center. Just silence. My father cleared his throat. So, how's everyone? Chloe kicked him lightly under the table. Dad? He sighed. We need to address it. Finally, Mason leaned back in his chair. I said I was wrong. On the phone, I replied calmly. That counts. Not fully. Silence. My mother folded her napkin carefully. Mason, she said softly, did you pay the bill? He stiffened slightly. Not yet. There it was. Not yet. Why? I asked. I'm figuring it out. You've had 2 weeks. It's not like I meant to send you to the ER. You meant to test it. Silence. I didn't think you didn't need to think it was real, I said evenly. You just needed to respect that I said no. The room went still. My father stared at his plate. Chloe looked between us like she was watching a tennis match. You're acting like I poisoned you, Mason said. You endangered me. That's dramatic. There it was again. Dramatic. I inhaled slowly. No, I said quietly. Dramatic is waving shrimp in someone's face to prove a point. He looked away. You've always been sensitive, And you've always treated that like weakness. Silence, then something unexpected. My mother stood up, not abruptly, deliberately. Mason, she said firmly. Enough. The word hung heavier coming from her. You didn't stop me at Thanksgiving. He shot back. I should have. That shifted the air. He blinked. What? I should have stopped you. Silence. You laughed. I added softly. Her eyes flicked toward mine. I know. The honesty cracked something open. Mason looked confused. Why are you both acting like this was some crime? Because it was. But I didn't say that. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the hospital invoice, placed it on the table. The paper slid across the wood. $3,842.17 ambulance. Stabilization. Medication, observation. My mother stared at the number. My father leaned forward slightly. Mason didn't look at it. I don't have that just sitting there. He muttered. You have savings, Chloe said quietly. That's for other things. What's more important than this? I asked calmly. Silence. I'll pay half, he said finally. No, what? Full? That's unreasonable. You put shrimp in my face. You're not even hospitalized anymore. That sentence did it. Not because it was loud, because it was revealing. To him, the danger ended when I left the ER. To me, it started long before that. This isn't just about the bill, I said. Then what is it about? He snapped. It's about the fact that you think my boundaries are optional. Silence. Heavy. You always make things bigger than they are, he said quietly, and you always shrink them. The room felt smaller, hotter. My father finally spoke. Mason, you need to pay it. He looked up sharply. Dad, you need to pay it. No softness. No joke. Firm. You think she's right? Mason asked. Yes. Silence. He looked at my mother. She didn't look away. You endangered her, she said quietly. There it was, the word endangered. Not joked with, not teased, endangered. Mason's posture shifted slightly, not defensive, not defeated, cornered. I didn't mean to, he said again. I know, I replied, but you did. Silence. Long enough for it to settle. Fine, he muttered, I'll pay it. When? Tomorrow? I held his gaze. No installments. His jaw tightened. Tomorrow? That was the first time in our lives he didn't try to out-argue me, because this wasn't about logic. It was about consequence. Dinner resumed slowly. No one reached for jokes. No one teased. The air felt different, less comfortable, more honest. As I stood to leave, Mason followed me to the door. You didn't have to make it public, he said quietly. You made it public. Silence. You're not going to let this go, are you? I already have. He frowned. What? I just won't forget it. That unsettled him, because forgetting is how patterns survive, and I wasn't participating anymore. The next morning at 9:07 a.m., the payment notification arrived. $3,842.17 transferred. Not partial, full, but the money wasn't the shift. The shift was that for the first time in his life, he faced consequence without laughter buffering it, and what happened 3 weeks later at Christmas dinner proved something even more permanent, because when the seafood platter came out that night, he didn't joke, he moved it. Christmas at my parents' house is louder than Thanksgiving. More people, more noise, more opinions layered on top of each other like wrapping paper. But this year, there was something quieter beneath it. Not tension, awareness. I arrived at 4:28 p.m. carrying dessert, my purse slightly heavier than usual, not because of gifts, because of the EpiPen. I don't leave home without it, ever. The kitchen was already crowded, my aunt slicing ham, Chloe arranging plates, my mom stirring something on the stove, and there, on the counter, a seafood platter, shrimp cocktail, crab claws, oysters on ice. I stopped walking. Not frozen, just measuring. My mother saw me notice it. Her hand stilled slightly on the wooden spoon. We kept it separate, she said quickly. Different counter, different utensils. I nodded. No accusation, just observation. Then Mason walked in behind me. He saw the platter. He saw me, and for a split second the old version of him flickered. The smirk, the tease forming, then something else happened. He stepped forward, picked up the platter, and moved it. Not dramatically, not announcing it, just quietly relocating it to the far end of the island, away from me, away from my plate. He didn't look at me when he did it, but he didn't joke either. That was the shift, because jokes are how he used to deflect discomfort. Silence meant he'd learned something. Dinner began at 5:17 p.m. Turkey passed. Wine poured. No one commented on my plate. No one teased. No one asked if I was over it yet. Midway through the meal, my uncle reached for the shrimp. Mason stopped him. Careful, he said lightly. Don't cross-contaminate. The word landed differently coming from him. Cross-contaminate. Clinical. Precise. Not dismissive. I looked up. He didn't meet my eyes. But he didn't look away quickly either. It wasn't apology. It was adjustment. After dinner, my father raised his glass. To family, he said. Simple, unembellished. No jokes. No qualifiers. To boundaries, Chloe added softly. A few people laughed nervously, but not Mason. He just nodded once. Later, when most of the guests had left and only the immediate family remained, Mason approached me near the tree. He held a small envelope. I got you something, he said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. What? Open it. Inside was a printed receipt. Allergy training certification course. For what? I asked. I signed up, he said. For what? To not be stupid again. The phrasing wasn't polished, but it was honest. I didn't think it was real. He added quietly. I know. And I don't want to be the guy who almost kills his sister over a joke. Silence. He almost smiled, almost. And for the first time in years I didn't feel like the dramatic one. I felt steady. Later that night, as I stood in the kitchen helping my mom rinse dishes, she leaned toward me. You didn't weaponize it, she said quietly. What? Thanksgiving? You mean I didn't cut him off? Yes. I didn't need to. Silence. You set the boundary, she said. Yes. And you held it? Yes. She nodded slowly. I used to think that was harsh, and now, I think it's necessary. That was the real change. Not the bill, not the sirens, not the platter relocation. Necessary. My allergy wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. My boundary wasn't emotional. It was necessary. And for the first time in our family no one laughed when I said no. Because sometimes the loudest lesson isn't revenge, it's consequence. My brother called my seafood allergy fake at Thanksgiving. 3 weeks later, he moved the shrimp without a joke. That's not chaos. That's growth. And growth, in my family, used to be the punchline. Not anymore. If you've ever had to teach someone that your boundary wasn't optional, tell me in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.